wind howls down the dusty streets of Bannack, Montana, carrying with it the whispers of a violent past that refuses to die. This abandoned settlement stands as a frozen monument to the gold rush era, where hope and greed collided with deadly consequences. Visitors who walk these wooden boardwalks often report an unsettling sensation of being watched by unseen eyes hiding within the decaying structures. The silence here is heavy and oppressive, as if the very air is holding its breath, waiting for the return of the souls who met their tragic ends in this isolated valley. It is a place where history is not just remembered, but felt in the marrow of your bones. Shadows stretch long across the weathered facades of the remaining 60 buildings that compose what was once the first territorial capital of Montana. The town rests in the desolate landscape along Grasshopper Creek, where the water still murmurs secrets of the gold that was pulled from its depths. It is not merely the architecture that has been preserved in a state of arrested decay, but the spiritual residue of the miners and outlaws who walked these paths. Many believe that the energy of the violent events that transpired here has imprinted itself onto the land, creating a permanent loop of tragedy and fear. Bannack was born in 1862 when John White and his fellow prospectors discovered significant gold deposits in the creek waters. The news spread like wildfire, bringing a flood of fortune seekers to this remote corner of the West. Within a short time, the population swelled to over 3,000 people, transforming a quiet canyon into a bustling hive of activity. Tents gave way to log cabins, and false front businesses rose up to serve the needs of the miners. However, along with the honest laborers came a darker element of society, looking to prey upon the hard won wealth of others. The remoteness of the camp and the lack of organized law enforcement made Bannack a haven for criminals and desperados. Gold dust flowed freely through the saloons and gambling halls, attracting road agents who would stop at nothing to acquire it. The road connecting Bannack to Virginia City became known as the Bloody Trail due to the frequency of stagecoach robberies and murders. Travelers disappeared without a trace, and bodies were often found riddled with bullets in the sagebrush. Fear gripped the honest citizens as they realized that no one was safe from the predations of the ruthless gangs. At the center of this turmoil was a charismatic and handsome man named Henry Plummer, who arrived in Bannack with a mysterious past. He quickly ingratiated himself with the townsfolk and was elected sheriff in 1863 with the hope that he would bring order to the chaos. Henry Plummer was articulate and well-mannered, presenting the image of a civilized gentleman amidst the rough frontier crowd. He married a local schoolteacher named Electa Bryan and seemed to settle into the role of a respectable community leader. However, beneath this polished exterior lay a cunning and dangerous mind. Rumors began to circulate that Sheriff Henry Plummer was actually the secret leader of a vast criminal organization known as the Innocents. This band of outlaws allegedly had spies in every stagecoach station and saloon, passing information about gold shipments to the road agents. The gang used a series of secret handshakes and code words to communicate and identify one another. They wore their neckerchiefs in a specific knot to signal their affiliation with the group, while Plummer posed as the lawman. His deputies were often the very men committing the robberies and murders on the highway. The situation reached a breaking point as the death toll continued to rise, with over 100 unsolved murders attributed to the road agents. The citizens of Bannack and the surrounding camps lost faith in the legal system, realizing that the law itself was corrupt. In the absence of justice, a group of men formed a secret society known as the Montana Vigilantes. They swore an oath to rid the territory of the criminal element by any means necessary. They began to hunt down suspected members of the Innocents, dispensing swift and brutal summary justice without the benefit of a trial. The Vigilantes struck with terrifying efficiency, capturing and hanging suspected outlaws throughout the region. They extracted confessions at gunpoint, which implicated Henry Plummer as the mastermind behind the gang. On a freezing night in January 1864, a large group of armed vigilantes marched to the cabin where Henry Plummer was staying. They found the sheriff resting and immediately took him into custody. Plummer was shocked by the sudden turn of events and pleaded for his life, claiming his innocence until the very end. Henry Plummer was dragged through the snow to the gallows, which ironically he had ordered to be built for a previous execution. Two of his deputies, named Buck Stinson and Ned Ray, were also captured and brought to the same structure. The air was frigid, and the only light came from the torches held by the grim-faced mob. Plummer begged for time to pray and asked for mercy for his wife, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The vigilantes were determined to end the reign of terror that night, and nothing would sway their resolve. The three men were hoisted up on the gallows, their bodies twitching in the cold night air as the life was choked out of them. It is said that Henry Plummer was the last to die, watching his deputies perish before his eyes. This act of vigilante justice marked the end of the Innocents gang, but it also left a dark stain on the history of Bannack. The question of whether Henry Plummer was truly the villainous ringleader or a victim of hysteria and political rivalry remains a subject of debate. However, his spirit seems to have never left the town where he met his gruesome fate. Today, the gallows still stand in the gulch behind the town, a stark reminder of that brutal night. Visitors who hike up to this location often report feeling a sudden drop in temperature and an overwhelming sense of dread. Some have claimed to hear the sounds of a crowd murmuring and the creaking of rope against wood. It is as if the emotional intensity of the execution has scarred the atmosphere, leaving a residual haunting that replays the event over and over. The ghost of Henry Plummer is said to wander the area, still seeking the justice he was denied. One of the most active locations for paranormal activity in Bannack is the Hotel Meade. This imposing brick building originally served as the casual courthouse for the county before becoming a hotel. It was a center of social life in the town, but it also holds tragic memories. The building stands solid and cold, with its empty windows staring out like hollow eyes. Inside, the peeling wallpaper and creaking floorboards set the stage for numerous ghostly encounters. Guests and staff have reported seeing the apparition of a teenage girl dwelling on the upper floors. The girl is believed to be Dorothy Dunn, who drowned in the Dredge Pond near the hotel in 1916. She was just 16 years old when she ventured into the water with her friends and stepped into a deep drop-off. Despite the efforts to save her, she slipped beneath the surface and perished. Her spirit is often seen wearing a blue dress, wandering the hallways of the Hotel Meade. Witnesses describe her as looking sad and lost, sometimes appearing solid enough to be mistaken for a living person, until she vanishes into thin air. Another haunting presence in the Hotel Meade is that of a young child often heard crying or giggling in the empty rooms. Visitors have reported capturing electronic voice phenomena of a child asking for their mother. The feeling in certain rooms of the hotel is incredibly heavy, causing some people to feel nauseous or dizzy. There are accounts of cold spots that move through the building independently of any drafts. It is believed that the energy of the many people who passed through these doors has accumulated, creating a reservoir of spiritual activity. Across the street from the hotel stands the Skinner Saloon, which was owned by Cyrus Skinner, a known outlaw. The saloon was a rough establishment where violence was a nightly occurrence. Cyrus Skinner was eventually hanged by the Vigilantes for his involvement with the road agents. The energy in the saloon is described as aggressive and masculine. Visitors have reported being shoved or touched by unseen hands while exploring the dusty interior. It is as if the rowdy patrons of the past are still drinking and fighting in the afterlife. The Bassett House is another residence in Bannack that is known for its disturbing activity. This house was used to quarantine the sick during the devastating epidemics of scarlet fever and smallpox that swept through the town. Many children died within these walls, and their spirits seem to be trapped there. Visitors frequently report hearing the sounds of babies crying from the back bedrooms. The atmosphere in the house is one of profound sadness and despair, reflecting the immense suffering that occurred during those outbreaks. The crying baby house as it is sometimes called, is a focal point for paranormal investigators. Psychics who have visited the location claim to sense the presence of exhausted mothers weeping over their lost children. There are reports of cradle rocking on their own and toys moving without explanation. The tragedy of losing so many young lives has created a poignant haunting that affects almost everyone who enters the small wooden structure. The sorrow is palpable and hangs in the air like a thick fog. One particularly chilling story involves the Masonic Lodge, which occupies the upper floor of the schoolhouse building. The Masons were a secretive and influential group in Bannack, counting many prominent citizens among their members. Access to the lodge room is restricted, but those who have been near the staircase report seeing shadow figures lurking at the top. The sound of heavy footsteps pacing back and forth is often heard when no one is upstairs. It is rumored that the secrets discussed in that room are still being guarded by the spirits of the members. The town jail is a small log structure with a sod roof that sits dark and foreboding on the main street. It was here that prisoners were held before facing the miners' court or the vigilantes. The conditions inside were harsh and terrifying. Visitors who step into the cramped cells often feel an immediate sense of panic and claustrophobia. There are accounts of people being scratched or having their hair pulled while inside the jail. The negative energy of fear and desperation seems to have soaked into the very logs of the building. Boot Hill is the cemetery that overlooks the town, located on a wind-swept hill above the buildings. It is the final resting place for many of the residents, including the victims of the road agents and the outlaws themselves. The markers are weathered, and some are missing entirely. It is said that the spirits of those buried here are restless, especially those who died violently. Strange lights have been seen hovering over the graves at night, and the feeling of being watched is intense. A legendary encounter occurred involving a park ranger who was closing up the town for the night. He was walking down the main street, checking the locks on the doors, when he heard the distinct sound of piano music coming from the saloon. The music was a lively tune from the 1860s, played with skill and energy. As he approached the building, the music stopped abruptly. When he entered the saloon, it was completely empty and silent. He realized that he had been listening to a ghostly performance from a time long gone. Another terrifying incident happened to a photographer who was capturing images of the interior of the Methodist church. As she set up her tripod, she felt a cold hand grab her shoulder. She spun around, expecting to see a tourist, but the church was empty. She fled the building, leaving her equipment behind. When she returned later with a friend, she found her camera knocked over and the lens shattered. She vowed never to return to the church alone, convinced that an entity did not want her there. The feeling of being followed is a common complaint among those who explore Bannack. People often hear footsteps crunching on the gravel behind them, matching their pace. When they stop and turn around, there is no one there. This phenomenon happens in broad daylight as well as at dusk. It is as if the spirits of the vigilantes are still patrolling the streets, ensuring that no one breaks the rules of the town. The sense of authority and surveillance is a lingering remnant of the martial law that once ruled the camp. There is a specific house in Bannack known as the Oliver House, where a dark presence is said to reside. The windows of this house are often covered in fly specks and dust, but occasionally a face is seen peering out. Witnesses describe a gaunt face with sunken eyes that looks filled with malice. Those who enter the house report a smell of rotting meat and a feeling of extreme unease. It is a place that even the most seasoned paranormal investigators hesitate to enter alone. The legend of the Curse of Bannack suggests that anyone who takes an artifact from the town will suffer bad luck. The park office receives packages regularly from people returning rusty nails or pieces of wood they had taken as souvenirs. The letters accompanying these items tell stories of divorce, job loss, and illness that began immediately after the theft. The spirits of Bannack seem to be very protective of their property and do not tolerate their home being dismantled piece by piece. One winter, a group of snowmobilers decided to camp near the outskirts of the ghost town. In the middle of the night, they were awakened by the sounds of a horse galloping through their camp. They unzipped their tents to see a rider on a dark horse vanish into the trees. There were no hoof prints in the fresh snow the next morning. They packed up and left, immediately terrified by the phantom rider, who made no sound in the snow. The solitary confinement cell in the jail is a place of particular horror. It is a small black box where prisoners were kept in total darkness. People who have stepped inside for just a moment report seeing red eyes glowing in the corners. The feeling of suffocation is instant. It is believed that the madness of the men who were locked in there has remained staining the space with an insane energy. It is a concentrated pocket of pure negativity. The connection between the landscape and the violence is undeniable in Bannack. The sagebrush-covered hills seem to hide secrets in every ravine. The wind that blows through the canyon often sounds like human voices whispering warnings. It is a harsh environment that demanded a harsh way of life. The struggle for survival in the 1860s stripped away the veneer of civilization, revealing the raw animal nature of humanity. That raw energy is what still pulsates through the ghost town today. The story of the hanging of the road agent Clubfoot George Lane adds another layer to the lore. He was hanged in the drugstore building because his club foot made it difficult to march him to the gallows. He was buried in Boot Hill, and years later his grave was exhumed. The foot was severed and displayed in the courthouse for years. His spirit is said to be angry about the desecration of his body. He is often blamed for the disturbances in the old schoolhouse where the foot was once kept. As the sun sets over Bannack, the atmosphere changes dramatically. The warm hues of the wooden buildings turn gray and cold. The shadows lengthen and merge, creating pockets of absolute darkness. This is the time when the town truly belongs to the dead. The silence deepens, and the wildlife seems to go quiet. It is not a place where one feels welcome after dark. The barriers between the past and the present seem to dissolve, allowing the two worlds to overlap. The psychological impact of visiting Bannack can be profound. Many visitors leave feeling drained or emotional without knowing why. The tragic history of the place acts like a psychic weight that presses down on everyone who enters. It is a testament to the suffering that was endured here, from the back-breaking labor of the miners to the terror of the victims of the road agents. The emotional residue is thick. It serves as a somber reminder of the cost of the gold fever. There are tales of a phantom stagecoach that is sometimes heard thundering down the main road. The sound of hooves and the cracking of a whip echo off the canyon walls. It is the ghost of the overland stage that carried gold and passengers through the perilous territory. The stagecoach was the lifeline of the town, but also a target for death. Hearing its phantom passage is considered a bad omen by the locals who know the history. The intricate network of relationships between the townspeople, the outlaws, and the vigilantes was complex and often deadly. Betrayal was common, and trust was a dangerous luxury. This atmosphere of suspicion seems to linger in the empty streets. You can almost feel the sidelong glances and the whispered conspiracies. The town feels like a stage where a tragedy was enacted, and the actors are still waiting in the wings. Winter in Bannack is especially haunting. When the snow blankets the town and the temperatures drop below freezing, the isolation is absolute. The gray wood of the buildings stands out starkly against the white snow. It was in these harsh conditions that the vigilantes carried out their executions. The cold seems to amplify the ghostly activity. The frozen landscape preserves the town in a timeless state where the year is always 1864. The legend of the Weeping Woman of Grasshopper Creek is another enduring tale. She is said to walk the banks of the creek, searching for something she lost. Her wails are carried by the wind on stormy nights. Some say she is searching for gold, while others say she is looking for a lost child. Her sorrow is eternal, bound to the flowing water that was the lifeblood of the town. Exploring the interiors of the houses reveals peeling wallpaper layers of history revealing themselves. In some rooms, furniture remains, as if the occupants just stepped out. This creates a disorienting feeling of time travel. You expect to see a miner or a pioneer woman walk through the door at any moment. The boundary between the living and the dead feels incredibly thin in these intimate spaces. The town of Bannack stands as a warning about the fragility of order and the darkness of the human heart. It is a place where the veneer of society was stripped away, and men were forced to confront their true nature. The ghosts that haunt these buildings are the remnants of that confrontation. They are the echoes of a violent struggle for control and survival. They serve as guardians of a history that is soaked in blood. Even the wildlife in Bannack seems to behave strangely. Birds often avoid flying over certain buildings, and deer are rarely seen near the gallows. Animals are known to be sensitive to paranormal activity, and their avoidance of these spots is telling. It reinforces the idea that there is a palpable energy here that is disturbing to living creatures. The natural world recoils from the supernatural imprint. The final impression of Bannack is one of lingering dread. As you drive away from the town, you cannot shake the feeling that you have witnessed something forbidden. The empty windows of the Hotel Meade seem to watch your departure. The dust settles back onto the streets, erasing your footprints. The town returns to its silence, waiting for the next visitor to share its dark secrets. The ghosts of the Old West remain trapped in their cycle of violence and sorrow, forever a part of the Montana landscape. It is this enduring presence that makes Bannack one of the most haunting locations in America. It is not just a collection of old buildings, but a living memory of a brutal time. The stories of Henry Plummer, Dorothy, Dunn, and the Vigilantes are not just history lessons. They are active narratives that continue to unfold. The town is a vessel for the souls that cannot move on. It is a place where the past is always present, and the dead are never truly gone. The silence of Bannack is not empty, it is full. It is full of the unspoken words of the condemned, the prayers of the dying, and the cries of the grieving. It is a heavy silence that demands respect. To walk through Bannack is to walk through a graveyard where the tombstones are buildings. It is a journey into the heart of the darkness that accompanied the bright promise of gold. And once you have visited, a part of you never truly leaves. The mystery of the true nature of Henry Plummer remains the central enigma of the town. Was he a cold-blooded killer, or a man in the wrong place at the wrong time? The ambiguity of his story fuels the haunting. His spirit cannot rest because the truth was never established. He is the eternal prisoner of Bannack, waiting for a verdict that will never come. His presence anchors the town in its tragic past. As night fully claims the valley, the temperature drops, and the shadows merge into a single darkness. The town of Bannack sleeps, but it does not dream. It remembers. It remembers every bullet fired, every rope tightened, and every last breath taken. It is a repository of pain and fear, preserved by the dry mountain air. It stands as a dark jewel in the crown of Montana's history, a haunting reminder of the wild and bloody days of the Old West. The spirits of Bannack are the true owners of the town. We are merely trespassers in their domain. They watch us with ancient eyes, judging us as we pass through their world. They are the remnants of a time when life was cheap and death was sudden. They are the haunting Old West remnants that refuse to fade away. And they will be there waiting when the wind blows through the sagebrush again. So if you ever find yourself wandering the dusty streets of Bannack, listen closely. Listen to the wind and the creaking wood. You might just hear the whisper of Henry Plummer or the cry of Dorothy Dunn. But be warned, do not linger too long in the shadows, for in Bannack, the past is hungry, and it is always looking for new souls to join its eternal story.